Ladies and gentlemen and ladies, welcome back to episode 6 of Rowan Sports Lounge. I am here with Local 12 sports anchor Richard Skinner. Richard, how are you doing today?
Well, thanks for having me. Very much appreciate it.
Absolutely. I just want to obviously say that it is very snowy in Oxford, obviously, but there's about 5 inches coming down. I'm not sure about you, but it is the perfect day for a podcast episode. I'd say it's nice and cozy where I'm
Yeah,
in.
I live in northern Kentucky, and it just started coming down about an hour ago, and I'm semi-depressed because I have a pretty good-sized driveway that I got all shoveled off from that last snow, and I'm going to go out probably after this podcast and start the shoveling process all over again.
Oh, I can only imagine how long that's going to take because
Yep.
it just seems to be getting worse. I saw before you joined, I saw snow just completely collapse onto the ground from the roof of the dorm hall that I'm currently situated in.
As I say, there's
So,
probably too much of it.
yeah. But anyways, I would like to get started with some questions for you. Obviously, a basic one. What made you want to become a sports anchor?
Well, actually, my official title right now is digital sports columnist and editor, and I cover the Bengals on a daily basis. But I have sports anchored before. I haven't done it consistently in a while. Um, it was something that I always wanted to get into play by play. I've done play by play, but it was what I wanted to do as a kid. I majored in journalism at the University of Kentucky, and when I got out, um, I did get University of Kentucky games on the college radio station play by play, and thought I was going to land a job with an NBA team right out of college. I really thought that in my heart of hearts. And of course, it didn't happen. So I started in the newspaper business and stayed in the newspaper business for a while. Worked for both of the newspapers in Cincinnati, the Post, which was an afternoon paper that's no longer, and the Inquirer as well. And while I did both of those, work for those papers, I also hosted a sports talk radio show with a buddy of mine. We did it for 13 years, a morning show on what became ESPN 1530. In fact, we launched ESPN 1530 here in Cincinnati and did some stuff on WLW. And I had a guy who was a sports producer at Channel 12 who liked my opinions, liked that I was opinionated, and wanted to know if I wanted to join their show on Sunday nights at the time called The Sports Authority. Brad Johansson was the host, and it was a rotating panel of me, and then usually a former athlete of the sport in season, a former Red, a former Bengals player, former college basketball player, and we would have debates on different topics. And I did that for free. I just wanted to see, the medium of television. Could I do it? Would I be any good at it? Would it work? And he liked my work. And lo and behold, they had an anchor position come open at different times, and I filled in to do that, and wound up doing that for a period of time, and then went back into the newspaper business full time again for a couple of years, and then got offered a job back at Channel 12 in the current capacity, which again is I do all the stuff for our website. I cover the Bengals on a daily basis, both in season and out of season. There's not as much daily news out of season as there is in season, but there is some. I mean, there's always something going on, or a mock draft to do, or a mock off season to do, something like that. So yeah, I guess I grew up as one of those guys that just I admired guys who did things on television and radio, and my uncle was a former newspaper reporter, so I always wanted to go that route, and have kind of found my way into doing just about everything that anybody could do in this city, from play by play to anchoring to doing a radio show to working for newspapers and now doing stuff for a website. So it's been a heck of a 40-year run. I'm not gonna lie.
That's absolutely insane. I mean, obviously you can get a lot done just in one career, but from what you've done in your 40 years, it seems like you've accomplished so much. I'd be surprised if you still had anything left on the table you'd like to achieve, honestly.
There
Um,
really is. There really isn't, to be honest with you. It's a funny question. The one thing I would tell people is this, and in that whole process of the jobs I just said, and I think this would be important for those that are watching it, maybe for students like yourself, is networking with people is so important. I don't think I've interviewed for more than one job in my lifetime. Every job I've gotten along the way is because I have known somebody who liked what I did, decided to offer me a chance. I jumped at that chance to do the Sports Authority, and did it for free. And it turned into be probably my last job is with the company I did some stuff for free for, the last job before I retire. And so I think that's important is make sure you network. It's that's how you're going to probably get your jobs along the way. I was working at a small newspaper in Maysville, Kentucky, my first job out of college, and I somehow knew the guy who was the sports information director at NKU, who then went to work at the Cincinnati Post, and a job came open, and he called and said, "Hey, would you be interested?" And I was, and I came up, and he and I then eventually became radio partners together for 13 years. And networking is really, really important. Don't shy away from that.
I totally agree. I've had so many guest speakers in my semester one class, which is sports management, and every single one of them has said that the biggest thing you need to do to get your name out there is definitely networking. I had a big trip that I did to where I went from Cincinnati into Hamilton into Dayton, and I gave out about 30 resumes to different news stations, different radio stations. I'm pretty sure I gave out two resumes to, I think I gave out one to WL, or no, I think it was WXIX. And I don't think I was able to do WLWT, but I believe I did hit ESPN 1530 as well.
And
But
don't be afraid of the rejection part of it, because it's going to happen. Like I said, I thought I was landing a job with an NBA team right out of college, and it didn't happen. And then you learn, okay, I got to pivot here, and maybe it's not the right time and place. The people don't know me, so my name gets shuffled to the bottom of the thing, and that's where again the networking part becomes important, because eventually, when you do prove your worth and people do know your name and people do respect what you do, then doors just open left and right.
absolutely, I had gotten an email actually from one of the people. It was the one place I went to in Hamilton actually, and I am scheduled for something on Thursday for a
Awesome.
possible internship for a radio station called WMH MOH.
For sure, I know WMOH very well.
Yeah. And the person I talked to is really passionate about sports, and he definitely sees me as a key role. We just obviously need to go over, a quick meeting, all that sort of stuff, and just see what fits best for me, and if I'm fit enough for the role that he has in place for me. But I guess my second question, moving on from that, would be, what has been your favorite moment in your career so far? It can be from any of your roles.
Got two of them. One, when Northern Kentucky University moved from Division II to Division I in basketball, I was technically the backup play-by-play announcer. Jim Kelch, who did Reds games at the time, was the main guy. But when they played their first ever Division I game in San Diego, Jim had a Reds commitment. I think it was the Reds Caravan he was on in November of that year. So I got a chance to call the first ever Northern Kentucky University Division I basketball game. And then another one was the night, it was 2017. I can't remember the specific date, but it was June in 2017. I was anchoring that night, and it was a slow night. Felt like it's just going to be a couple Reds highlights and a couple of this and that. And Scooter Jeanette happened to hit 4 home runs that night, and so we had to scramble to go on the lead the newscast with it. And you're scrambling to make sure you have your copy written in time. And sports usually goes on at 20 minutes after. When you're at the top of a newscast, you're on it right at the top of the hour, and sometimes that doesn't jibe with the way the last home run is hit probably right before that took place. Like, if it happens, you're going to be there. If it doesn't, you're going to be there, but you got to change copy around. So just the rush of that, and doing it right, and just kind of a cool moment. I mean, I think only 18 guys have hit 4 home runs in a game in Major League Baseball history. So it was a cool moment because of the rush of it from a deadline perspective, and just because you got a chance to report on history.
Well, I'd say I have two questions from that. One of them being about NKU. Were they always situated in the Horizon League when they came to Division One, or were they in a
No,
different conference?
yeah, they were in the Atlantic Sun Conference at the time, and then switched not too far. I think they were in the ASUN for 2, maybe 3 years max. I think it was just 2 years, and then switched to the Horizon League.
That's so surprising considering that EKU is in, I believe, Conference USA, or no, I mean Western Kentucky is in either
Yes.
Conference USA, I think.
That or the American, they've switched up so much. I know Eastern
Yeah,
Kentucky used to be in the Ohio Valley. They're now in the Atlantic Sun Conference. There's just been a
yeah.
lot of teams switching around over the years. The Rising made a lot of sense. I mean, a lot of schools within driving distance: Detroit, Oakland, Wright State, uh,
Cleveland State.
Robert Morris, Cleveland State. Right. I mean, so you got a lot of teams that you can get to from a driving perspective. It just made a lot of sense for them.
Yeah, honestly, I don't see any other conference that just made more sense for NKU.
Yep.
I'm not sure. I was always thinking that NKU would possibly establish a football program at some point, mainly because of the fact that I feel as if they, even though it's a commuter college, I feel as if they have the space to possibly build something there.
Well,
I'm not sure.
they explored that about 20 some odd years ago and found out the financial ramifications of it were not going to work. It was going to be too financially unfeasible for them to do it, so they didn't.
I kind of figured that'd be a roadblock, honestly. It's not obviously there's different reasons that certain colleges don't implement certain sports into their athletic programs. Obviously, Xavier being one of them. I'm pretty sure one of the reasons being because of where they're currently situated, and there's really not much space to work around. Obviously, but it's also just not. They weren't getting much traction. But I'd say NKU definitely. It was either that or what you said, financial issues in general.
Yeah, it's an expensive sport, especially when you factor in scholarships and now you factor in NIL. It just becomes untainable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. My second question related to the Reds. I'm guessing you've heard of the news. I can never pronounce his name correctly, but Eugenio Suarez. He got
Yeah,
signed on a 1 year deal.
Eugenio Suarez. Yes, correct.
He is one of my favorite players, and I was so sad that he got traded to the Mariners. Unfortunately, a few years back, and I remember the whole comment section on each one of their social media platforms being "Fire the team, Bob." But I'm so happy that he's back. Honestly, he's one of my favorite players just to watch in general. Besides, obviously Ellie De La Cruz, and all the other players on the Reds.
Yeah, they needed a big bat in the middle of the lineup, and
Yeah.
he had 49 home runs last year. You can do the flip side of it and look at what he did after he got traded, and his numbers weren't great. He had a sub 700 OPS and only hit 189, but that was only in a 53 game sample size. But he still hit 13 homers. It would have extrapolated out to 40 home runs in a season. So they need that bat. They need a right handed power bat to put in the middle of the lineup. It's not going to cost them much. 1 year, $15 million, and it's the right thing to do. He's coming back to a place he's hit really well in Great American Ballpark, and so it made all the sense in the world.
Yeah, it's a place that he's familiar with. I was honestly thinking that they were going to try and get somebody in the outfield. Obviously, I know they've got a few studs on their roster. I'm not too familiar with the Reds, even though I do watch them. It's not as prominent in the amount of research I typically do for sports, but I obviously try and pay attention to at least get a little bit more knowledge from it. But I've seen a lot more high scoring games from the Reds, and it wasn't from them. It was mainly from the opposite team that they were playing. I was kind of thinking, do you think they should go after maybe an outfielder to at least stop so much of their scoring?
Well, there really isn't anybody out there to go after, number one. And I think with getting Suarez, it moves Sal Stewart from a DH more to first base. They move Spencer Steer from first base to left field. You hope that solves it. They moved Noel De Marte last year from third base to right field. In a perfect world, yeah, they would have tried to go get an outfielder, and unfortunately, it just wasn't going to work out. So they just decided to add a big bat and figure out the rest later, and that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Yeah. Uh, I'm more or less surprised how we even got Suarez off a free agency signing, mostly because I thought somebody else would have taken him just because
Yeah,
of.
he actually, I think he took a little less money to come to Cincinnati too. He liked his time here. He got traded when they were dumping salary and rebuilding. I think he understood that. Got a chance to go play in a World Series this past year when he got traded back to Seattle from Arizona. So it worked out well for him, and he gets to come back. And again, probably took a little bit of a discount to do so because he's coming back to a hitter's park. He liked his time playing here, and sometimes you get lucky like that. I think the market came back to the Reds on this. They got a guy at the right price at the right time.
I obviously think that if there was anything that sealed the deal for this free agency besides Suarez being signed, it'd have to be Jesse Winker coming back. Uh, I'd say I miss him just as much. Mainly because of the fact that during that 2021 season, we were obviously so hyped. You know, Joey Votto was absolutely going off on the Reds with his streak of home runs in how many games was it? I can't honestly remember. I
Yeah,
think he
that was a weird year for sure. But the Winker one too was just one where he just didn't fit any longer. He doesn't run very well. He does hit. He's probably best suited in a DH role, and now you've got your DH role filled. So I don't think that's going to happen.
yeah, unfortunately not. But it's I never want to count it out, but obviously, as you stated, it's not really necessary to get him back onto the Reds or anything like that. There's not really any need to make any sort of move like that. But I'd say switching it up just a little bit off of the questions, we're going to switch to something that I think everybody loves because who doesn't love the Super Bowl?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great matchup. There's no question. I mean, New England, I think, has proven that you can get this thing fixed in a year. They came into Cincinnati last year to open the season and upset the Bengals 16-10 and went on to win just three more games. And they've turned around in 1 year with a new head coach, and they had some money to spend and spent it wisely. Did great in the draft. They found their quarterback last year in Drake May through the draft, and they're able to build around a guy on a rookie contract. That's a good thing. And then Seattle on the flip side, their defense has just been lights out. It wasn't great in the NFC Championship game, but leading up to that, they were absurdly good for a stretch of time. Sam Darnold won a bunch of games in Minnesota last year. They decided he wasn't the man because he made some mistakes in the playoffs, and he's become the man in Seattle. And I think it's a fun matchup. I know people probably are fatigued at seeing New England back in the Super Bowl after the run they had for many years, but it's a different New England. It's not Belichick. It's not Brady. It's a team that, to their credit, they found a way to fix stuff in one off season and did a great job to do so.
Yeah, honestly, I'm just glad it's not the Chiefs for once because,
I think that's for a lot of people.
yeah. But I'm just as surprised as you are because I'm surprised just at the backlash that people are getting for giving New England just because of the fact that they're back in the Super Bowl. Like, come on, man. At least it's not the same matchup over five of the same years. At least it's not the Eagles. At least it's not the Chiefs. You know, I'm happy that the Seahawks are back in the Super Bowl. I'd say I was a little bit sketchy about Sam Darnold getting traded from Minnesota into Seattle because he was obviously quickly going from one team to the other, and having a big scheme change would possibly alter what he was doing, obviously, from Minnesota into Seattle. And I'm really happy that he's adjusted quite well to the point where he brought his team to the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
But
no,
on
I mean, it's a former first round draft pick who flamed out in New York because the talent around him stunk. Um, had a great year, as I mentioned last year in Minnesota, but they decided they had drafted a quarterback the year before, and they thought, well, Sam didn't do it for us in the playoffs, and we believe in this kid. In fact, the decision to do that just cost Minnesota's GM his job a couple of days ago, because the ownership group watched Sam Darnold take Seattle to the Super Bowl as opposed to leading Minnesota to the playoffs. And so he's a great redemption story. And that's yeah, back to your original point. I mean, I think we all get we get fatigued with the same team. We got fatigued with the Patriots for the long period of time. We got fatigued with the Chiefs for a long period of time. And so it is, even though the Patriots have a name and have a lineage, I do think it's cool that they're back in it. And I've always liked Seattle. I think they run things great.
Yeah. Obviously, I wanted to touch on a few Patriots players. Obviously, one of them being Travion Henderson. The dude's he had a pretty slow start in the regular season, at least from my understanding, not being able to get too many yards. But obviously, he was learning behind Ramondre Stevenson. But he really picked it up. Do you think he would probably be one of the scoring opportunities that the Patriots have
Well,
for the
unfortunately,
Super Bowl?
I'm in a fantasy playoff league in which we drafted guys, and once they're out, you lose that guy. You can't go get another guy. And I was all in on the Travion Henderson train, thinking he was going to have a great postseason and run. And for whatever reason, they've gone away from him and gone more to Ramondre Stevenson. He has not scored in the playoffs. He hasn't picked up many yards in the playoffs. I'm going to probably make a small prop wager on him scoring a touchdown in this game. I got to ride the Travion Henderson train out one more time. But yeah, it's been odd to me. They've kind of gone away from him and really gone more to Stevenson and leaned on him a little bit. But Super Bowls are weird, man. There was a guy you're gonna have to look him up. His name was Timmy Smith, a running back for the Washington Redskins back in the day, who didn't have much of a career. Probably even had less than 1,000 yards in his brief career, but had a Super Bowl in which somehow, some way, he rushed for over 200 yards. He had his magical day, and those things sometimes happen in big games. The guy you don't expect, and Travion had some really big games this year where he popped some long touchdown runs. Was a great change of pace back. I thought they leaned back into that two back system, and they just haven't done that as much in the playoffs, and maybe they do in the Super Bowl. Maybe that's their tweak a little bit, is to use more of Travion Henderson, because he doesn't have a chance to take it a long way every time he touches the football.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not a Ramondre Stevenson hater by any means. It's just I'd like to see the rookies obviously getting some playing time, even though they're trying to learn behind somebody else who's more experienced and somebody who just works better in the scheme at that current time. I just think it'd be better especially for viewership and all that sort of stuff, to obviously showcase the rookies even in a Super Bowl, because I mean Jamar Chase was in a Super Bowl and he played prominent time. Obviously it was because of the fact that we had two really good receivers, and Jamar just decided to prove himself a little bit more that season, especially with the fact that we had three receivers receiving for 1,000 yards
Yeah,
that
Tyler Boyd
season.
and T. Higgins. That was a pretty good group. I mean, Jamar Chase on a different planet, though. I mean, he is
Yeah.
the elite of the elite. Travion Henderson at the moment is just kind of a guy. I think he has a chance to really have a nice career. But again, Ramondre Stevenson, I think they trust him more at the moment because he is the veteran. You are in the playoffs. Coaches tend to trust those guys more. Now you'll trust Jamar Chase as a rookie because he's just such an elite talent. But I think when you get to postseason, a lot of times you're going to put your trust more in a guy that's done it for a longer period of time than you are a rookie. And maybe it's just the way that the games have played themselves out, that they've decided to go with more of an inside run threat and let Drake May carry the load for the rest. We'll see come Sunday. I mean, there's always a guy or two where you're like, whoever that guy was didn't have much of a season or didn't have much of a playoffs leading up to it, and yet has a big Super Bowl and comes out of nowhere.
Yeah. I mean, in coming from this and from Travion Henderson's stats, it makes me think that he's more used in the red zone. I've obviously maybe watched a few of his highlights, but I'd see him more being used in the red zone, considering he had more touchdowns than Ramondre Stevenson with 9 compared to 6, I believe. But he had less rushing yards, from my understanding, with I think only 600.
Yeah, they both, I think, had 600. A lot of his touchdowns actually were long distance touchdowns. I mean, he took some 20 plus yard, 30 plus yard, 50 plus yard ones to the house.
And the one in the preseason as well, when he his first return was
Kickoff
for,
return.
yeah, it was for a touchdown for my memory. But I'm more or less just surprised of the teams that are in the Super Bowl, because I would have thought that it would have been either somebody like the Chargers, if obviously Justin Herbert's O-line decided to hold up, even though they seem to get injured mid-season,
Yeah, they got banged
unfortunately.
up bad.
Yeah, it seems to be the same case every single year, and I just never understand why. Because whenever I'm trying to watch somebody like Joe Alt or anybody else on that Chargers O line, it's really hard to when they're not playing. So
Yeah, no, that really hampered them. You could see it in the New England game. I mean, he had no time and got the living daylights knocked out of him.
yeah, honestly, there was one other team I believe that was most likely that I thought was most likely going to make the Super Bowl, and that was the Patriots, obviously. And I'm glad that they did. But the one last thing I would like to talk about with this section of the Super Bowl is people saying that the Patriots had a Cinderella run. They had an easy schedule. They're going to get demolished out there. And I think fans don't really take wins as like they should. They always seem to criticize any team that has like an easy schedule that makes it far. Like, you made it to the Super Bowl, for crying out loud. Like, I don't know what else you possibly want from that.
The fact is they did play an easy schedule, and the fact is they did get a little bit fortunate in the playoffs to not face Bo Nix on his home turf and face a backup quarterback. But you still have to go win the game, and they did that across the board. They won a bunch in the regular season against that schedule. I mean, the flip side is you lose games against an easy schedule. That doesn't make you a very good team. They wound up winning games against that schedule, put themselves in an advantageous place to be the 2 seed and get a couple of home games, and then yeah, did you get a little fortunate that it was a backup quarterback in Denver? Yeah, you probably sure did. But at the same time, the flip side is you lose that game and you lost to a backup quarterback. No, you won that game. You're in the Super Bowl, and yeah, they earned their way there. I get the fix of that, but yeah, I don't understand the criticism of that either. You play who's in front of you, and you either beat them or you don't. And they did. They went and won, and here they are.
Yeah, because you can't just predict injuries. You can't predict players being out or anything like that. And obviously, another fact about it would be that I'd say like if Bo Nix was healthy, they would have been playing a really tough Broncos team, especially with the defense. The other factor of that AFC Championship game was also just the snow. I mean, we got a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
snowstorm, and New England was no different. I mean, seriously, like they could have blamed it all on the fact that Jared Stidham was playing, but for crying out loud, you couldn't see what was going on the field half the time you were watching.
Right.
Like,
Field goals were hard. Field goals were dicey,
yeah.
and their defense held up. That's the bottom line. Their defense did exactly what it needed to do to win that game.
Yeah. And I just say that you got to give credit where credit's due, regardless of, who you're playing, who wins, who loses, and what circumstances you're playing under. Like it's going to happen. Obviously, there's going to be some issues that arise within those types of games and just upcoming games in general. Like it's not you shouldn't give people criticism for doing what they're supposed to.
They did.
Yeah. But switching it up a little bit, I would like to. You obviously said that you do a ton of mock drafts. I really love mock drafts as well, but I want to ask who's your pick for the Bengals in the first round for this draft?
Kind of settled on five guys, and it depends on what mock draft you look at, what simulator you use, all of those things. Um, and they would be not in any special order. Ruben Bain, the defensive end from Miami of Florida. David Bailey, the defensive end from Texas Tech. Caleb Downs, a safety from Ohio State. A guy named Mansour Delane, who's a cornerback out of LSU. And then Jamal McCoy, a cornerback who did not play this past year at Tennessee, but was highly regarded in 24. He suffered a knee injury. One of those five should be on the board when the Bengals pick it at number 10. I did a story last week in which I looked at 10 different mock drafts and who they all took. I think four of the 10 wound up taking Caleb Downs, and out of those 10, out of the others, the reason they did is that David Bailey, Ruben Bain were off the board. In fact, I think Bailey and Bain were off the board in 9 of the 10 mock drafts by the time the Bengals picked. So you got to be ready to pivot. The Bengals obviously have to be ready to pivot. I mean, you can go in with your board the way you like it, and you watching all the guys you wanted, they're off the board, so you have to be ready to pivot. So yeah, I think it's one of those five. I've seen a name from a couple of other mock drafts, a guy named defensive end Keldrick Falk out of Auburn, who unfortunately probably reminds me more of Shamar Stewart, where it's a lot of traits over production. You see the physicality, he's a freak athletically, but then you look and he had 10 sacks in 3 years of college football. And so it doesn't measure up in that regard. So to me, the no brainer would be if one of the two main ends, Bailey or Bain, fall, and I don't think either one does. Like I said, in 9 of the 10 mock drafts, they were both gone by the time the Bengals picked. But if Caleb Downs is on the board, it feels like such a no brainer. I know safeties are not coveted. I know safeties get bypassed. Um, Zach Taylor's favorite player in the NFL opponent is Kyle Hamilton, the safety for the Baltimore Ravens. And Kyle Hamilton slid in the draft because he didn't have measurables and he didn't run a certain time. Kyle Hamilton's just a football player. I mean, he just makes plays. And that's what Caleb Downs does. Caleb Downs doesn't have a ton of measurables, but he's just a smart player. He makes plays. He's aggressive in the run game. They desperately need a safety, an impact safety, and it just feels like if ever there was a no-brainer year with a guy on the board, if Caleb Downs is on the board and they pass, it'll be disappointing.
Yeah, I totally agree with the guys that obviously you picked. I had maybe one different player. I'm not sure if you mentioned Sonny Styles. I believe you did.
Yeah, I just don't think they go linebacker with already having two rookie linebackers. And I know those guys didn't play great, but I think they've kind of leaned into them being their linebackers moving forward. And Sonny Styles is a great player. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think he's outstanding. I think they will probably go the veteran free agent route just to give them a little depth at that spot, maybe even keep Oren Burks, a veteran, as the third linebacker. That's not to tell you that's off the board completely. If the board falls a certain way and Sonny Styles is the best guy there, then maybe you say yeah. But I just think because they had two rookie linebackers last year, they leaned into and want to see those two grow together. That I just don't see them going that route. But that doesn't mean he's not a good player. He's a very good player.
Yeah, I'd say that my must pick, if it falls just like you said, would be the no brainer with Caleb Downs. I understand that obviously we're going to be probably releasing Trey Hendrickson and we're going to be trying to make room for cap space as well. But I don't think people took into account that we are probably also going to release Geno Stone, mostly because of the lack of production he's had once he was traded to the Bengals. He had 2 interceptions over the 2 years that he's been with us compared to the 4 that he was with the Ravens. And that's not good at
No,
all.
the only way Geno Stone comes back is in a backup role, and I don't see that taking place either. They desperately need a safety. If they don't, they may find one that they like at the right price in free agency, and even if they did that, I still think if Caleb Downs was on the board, you go that route. They need help back there. They need more impact back there. Jordan Battle does some good things. He has highs, very very high highs, and very very low lows. He's got to be more consistent, but I think if he's got the right guy with him, I think he'd flourish. I think he didn't have the right guy with him. Geno Stone was a mess. He didn't tackle. Um, in Baltimore, the 1 year to his credit, he played on a great defense, and he took advantage of that by just basically playing back there in center field, intercepting 7 passes, and made his money. But he came here and he was exposed because they asked him to do more, and he just isn't good enough to do more.
Yeah. I mean, but I'd say the other reason that I'd pick Caleb Downs, and I'd also like to mention that I'd say that Jordan Battle also has just taken such a big leap compared to his first few years at Cincinnati. I'd say that he definitely, like you said, needs a bit of room for improvement, needs more consistency from where he's currently at. But I'd say I'd take Caleb Downs mostly because there is a first round snub, Akeem Messidor from Miami, that could potentially fall to the Bengals in the second round that they could potentially pick up to fill in that edge spot. And I'd say if
It's a
they
deep edge class.
yeah, definitely. There's no doubt about it. There is talent all across the board defensively, and I'd say it's a more defensive class this year rather than offensive because I'd say there's only maybe 2 wide receivers I really see being taken in the first round. Obviously, I'd see there's probably going to be more, but two of them that I guarantee are going to be taken is Jordan Tyson and why am I forgetting him? Ohio State's wide receiver.
Cardell Tate. Yeah, Cardell Tate.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how I forgot him.
Yeah,
um,
they'll both be gone. Yeah, they'll both probably be top 15 picks and maybe even top 10 picks when push comes to shove.
absolutely. It's I'd say that they could also go edge rusher, like you said, because of the fact that they need edge a little bit more. You know, they're losing a lot more depth on the edge, but I just think that Ruben Bain is going to be picked a lot earlier,
He is.
especially with a team like maybe the Saints, because they definitely need defense and they're picking before us. And I'd say that's something they go for. Or the Chiefs, you know, they pick up David Bailey and stuff like that, mainly because of the fact that their defense was probably one of their biggest issues this past season, not just because of injuries with players like Trent McDuffie and stuff like that, but I'd say that there's a lot more teams before us that just really want to prioritize getting themselves that edge rusher that could really change their defense around.
Yeah, and then obviously it depends on what you do in free agency, and that's a big part of it too. They need interior tackle, they need edge, they need corner, they need safety, as we mentioned. So we'll see how they do there, and then that gives you, I think, a blueprint for where you go when it comes to the draft. It's an important offseason because we saw New England got it turned around very quickly. The Bengals have an elite side of the football that they really don't have to address very much with the offense, and so you can really put a lot of focus on what you need to do to fix the defense and throwing a lot of eggs in that basket.
Absolutely. shifting it around for our next segment, it is going to be not football this time. It's actually going to be basketball, college basketball specifically, and it is my university. I know I love doing a little bit of gloating here and there, but I'd say this is a pretty good time to do it because Miami's still undefeated since the last podcast I had, which was when I was at home, for the after the semester ended. They were at the time 13-0, and now they are 22-0 with a game tonight at 6:30 on ESPN Plus against Buffalo again.
It's an incredible story. Listen, I've been asked this question in fact, I did a radio segment on Friday on WLW. Was asked about, we were talking about Miami and the fact of, what if they finish undefeated and then lose in the conference tournament? Do they still get a bid? I'm in the belief they don't and shouldn't. I feel bad for that because their non-conference schedule wasn't much. But that being said, they're one of the storylines in college basketball at the moment. Maybe they did this the right way by scheduling a bunch of wins in the non-con. And let me tell you, and I said this on Friday, winning in the MAC is not an easy task. I mean, you go on the road in the MAC, there are a lot of places that can trip you up. In fact, you mentioned tonight they play at Buffalo. This has all the earmarkings of undefeated team going on the road to a respectable team and not being able to win. I think going undefeated is going to be extraordinarily difficult. If they do it, I can maybe be talked into at that point that, okay, if they lose in the conference tournament, they just did something that's really hard to do. You went through an entire season in your conference where you have to play home and road against all the most of the opponents, and you went undefeated. And okay, you tripped up in a one and done scenario, which is the conference tournament. I can also say the flip side is if I put resume A versus resume B, resume A has 8 losses, but they've played a harder schedule and all the metrics show they're better. I can see that team getting a bid over of Miami, but it can't be discounted if they go undefeated. So the games that they could get tripped up are tonight. They got to play at UMass on February 17th, and they just had a knockdown drag out with UMass at home, which they won. And then the March 6th regular season finale at Ohio. Because it's such a rivalry game in any sport that Miami and Ohio you play. 2, it's on the road. And 3, at that point, that's the regular season finale. If you're undefeated going into that, just the simple pressure of trying to finish off an undefeated regular season against your main rival on the road is a big ask. If you do it, kudos to them. It is an outstanding story. It truly is. What Travis Steele has done has been magnificent. I know the campus has been energized. I know Millett Hall, which sometimes feels like it has 400 people watching Miami basketball, has gotten great crowds of late. The atmosphere has been great. So I think it's outstanding. I'm rooting for them just because the story's so great, and I do think it's really, really hard to do. I don't care if you're in the ASUN, the SEC, the Big 12, the Mid-American Conference. Going undefeated in your league is really hard to do.
Hey, there is a reason why we call it Maction. There is a reason why we call it Maction. But like you said, with the crowd obviously increasing, I don't know if you know this, but we actually broke our attendance record at Millett Hall this past Saturday. But I would like to include the fact that we're also going into Buffalo with the fact that they want revenge. And I'd say that's probably because of the fact that we hit two buzzer beaters, one of them being to tie them to go into overtime the first time we played them, and the other one being the game winner that we did against them the first time we played them.
Yeah, Ian Elmer 3 forced the overtime, right? And then Studer hit the game winner.
It was nuts. It was unbelievable. But another one that they obviously play when this episode will come out on Friday. Obviously, we'll have the game on Tuesday tonight. We'll obviously be done with and over with, and hopefully they come out with a win. If they come out with a loss, unfortunately, I'm going to be a little bit sad, but I'd say that's the majority of people on this campus right now, if that does happen. But they play Marshall on Saturday at 4 p.m., also on ESPN Plus, and I'd say that's definitely a big ask if they do obviously want to play really competitive against them, because it's like teams who are currently undefeated, they have like, you either are in, like you said, resume A or resume B, but in my version of it, you either have a team that's like really talented, has really good depth, and can keep going for multiple periods of time. But you also have resume B, which I see Miami in, where you do have talent, but there's essentially burnout. And once that burnout has really, really set in, you see more and more closer games against teams that are, you don't expect them to obviously have close scores with. But honestly, it's just how I see them right now. And even though people complain about the fact that like why don't they have other people scheduled against them? I don't think fans realize, which is it's unfortunate, but obviously it's definitely not as obvious. I'm pretty sure you can't schedule teams. I think you can't schedule teams obviously mid-season, which is understandable to most people, but the other thing is that you have to schedule teams in advance, I believe 2 years in advance, and you can't really
Yeah,
change them
sometimes, yeah, but
around.
sometimes, listen, they could have found a game. They could have found a higher level game to play, and they chose
Yeah,
not to, and that's fine. Listen, they did it. They went undefeated. If they had played, let's use Kentucky. They played at Kentucky and lost. They wouldn't be the talk of college basketball right now. They're the talk of college basketball because you know what they've got in the right hand column? A zero for zero losses. And so, okay, maybe a guy I do a weekly podcast with, Rick Roaring, is the analyst on NKU Radio, and he also runs a recruiting or actually a Xavier website. And he and I got in a Miami discussion the other day, and he made a good point. I said, they can be dinged for their non-conference, and I think they should be. And he said, well, yeah, okay, let's say they scheduled two really tough games out of league and lost them. Would it have helped their resume to lose them? And he made a good point. I said, no, but it doesn't help the resume to not have played them. But to your point, to his point was, but look what they've done. They've scheduled this and then gotten the MAC and won. Now they're in the AP top 25. And while that doesn't really mean a whole lot anymore, it does get you this. The Associated Press sends a reporter and photographers to teams in the top 25. So you're getting a little more national exposure there. You're a story on ESPN now because you're still have zero losses. You're a story that because it's building up to, boy, can this team finish out the regular season undefeated? And then becomes the story of, well, then what if? There's just so many great stories to it. And, I thought they were going to go in the tank when Evan Ipsaro, the point guard, got hurt and suffered a season ending injury. And they haven't. They keep on winning. They've won despite losing their point guard. And he's a good point guard. I coached against him in high school. He's a really good player. So I think they're a great story. Kudos to them. I'm rooting for them. I just hope they don't come to the what if scenario of what if you do stumble in the conference tournament? What does the committee do with you? I would tend to need to look at resumes of everybody they're up against, but I also can see with just one loss in a conference tournament, put them in, man. Go ahead and put them in.
absolutely. I'd say there's like half the fans right now are like really excited. They're still undefeated, but the other half the fans like me, it's just like it's a constant nail biter. It's just like
Whoa.
there's got to be one loss, and it's we don't know when it's gonna happen. We don't know when that bomb's gonna drop. It can happen any game.
Yeah,
And
like I said, as we're doing this podcast, the game tonight at Buffalo is not going to be an easy win, and you win it. It again makes you even more impressive to go on the road undefeated with a target on your back squarely and all the pressure to keep that zero. You keep stacking up wins on the road in the MAC. Good for you.
one thing I've definitely noticed though about Miami basketball is that they are more of a second half team. I say what they try and do is try and figure out their opponent mid game. Obviously, they have a plan going into it, as all basketball teams do, but they really try and figure out what's working for their team, working for the opponent's team in the first half. How can they try and stop it, and what can they try and use to their advantage going into the second half so they can at least, you know, they come out of the first half maybe either tied up or they might be ahead by a little bit. They want to figure out what possibly they can do to get over the edge and absolutely blow them out by the end of it, by the end of that of said game. And I just want to know your opinions on obviously that perspective itself. Do you
Yeah,
think
no,
that's
I think some of it's probably a little bit of the feeling out process, and some of that's just good coaching that you figure out. Okay, how can we attack them differently? How can we guard them differently? And I think they've done a really good job of that. And sometimes it's also we know how to win games like this. We've won a bunch of them like this. We've won a bunch of close games, and it's a comfort zone of, hey, we're in a close game, and the other team maybe isn't comfortable in that close game. And I do think it feeds on itself, and it's doing that. I mean, there have been a bunch of nail biters of late, as you mentioned. I mean, UMass was 88-85. The game at Kent a couple of weeks ago, was a nail biter. The first Buffalo game in which they have to make a three at the buzzer to force overtime and then hit a buzzer beater. And sometimes that's how you have magical seasons, is winning close games like that. Most conference teams, you may have a couple at the top of the pack and a couple at the bottom of the pack, and then a bunch of teams bunched up together that are about the same. That's what makes winning a lot of games or going undefeated in a conference so hard, is even those middle of the pack teams, when you go play them on the road, it's just a different animal. And so tonight's another great test. I cross my fingers for you guys.
Absolutely. I'd say one last thing on this segment that I'd like to address is obviously going back to some of the games that they've played, such as like Akron, Buffalo, Kent State. When they played against Akron, I believe they won. I can't remember the exact score, but they obviously won. But when Akron played Kent State in their big rivalry game, Akron blew them out by 20. So what makes this resume a little bit more solidified, especially with their MAC conference wins, would be I'd say be the fact that they're a lot more competitive when they're not playing against really tough opponents. But I'd say that it's also the fact that the opponents that they do play, they either have a rough night against them trying to figure them out, trying to figure out Miami constantly, but when they go against somebody else, they absolutely just forget that and they just absolutely eviscerate them, whoever else they're playing.
I think it also shows you that the Miami's pretty good. I mean, I think that's what it shows you too, is when you play Miami, Miami's pretty good.
Yeah, but I guess moving into this last segment before I give you the ending question, it would be the 1 year report for our first round pick for the Bengals, Shamar Stewart. I want to know your opinions on him so far.
Yeah, I think incomplete is the best way to put it. Injuries cut him short. He never really got going. Um, it was a controversial pick because he was a traits over production guy. 4.5 sacks is all he had in 3 years at Texas A&M as a regular, and all those sacks, all 4.5 of those sacks came against non-conference bums. So he really never did it in the SEC. But then you watch. Yeah, I did the day after they drafted him, I did a segment in studio at Channel 12, and Adam Clements was the interviewer, and he was asking me kind of, I said, well, this was a controversial pick, blah blah blah, and I said, yeah, I said, the crazy part is, if you didn't know all the lack of production stuff and you just went to YouTube or wherever you went and watched 2 minutes of his tape, you'd go, oh my gosh, this guy is unbelievable. He's all over the place. He's wrecking people, but he doesn't finish. And you saw that this year. He finally did get a sack in the Cleveland game. We talked to Al Gold, the defensive coordinator, a couple of days after that, kind of a season-ending wrap-up, and Al said that's kind of a big burden off it, that you didn't want to go into this offseason with this guy known for not producing, having 0 sacks in his rookie year, even though his season was cut short. I will say, it took him a while to sign. There was a little acrimony on both sides. He came to training camp and he flashed right away. Like, you saw all this freak athleticism. He was flying around. He was hard to block, and you thought, okay, maybe they got this right. Played pretty well in the opener at Cleveland, and then again got hurt. Never really got started. Came back, got hurt again. So I'm going to go incomplete. And we saw it this year with Miles Murphy. It was year three for Miles Murphy, and it took him really even half of this year to get going. Once he did, he's become a guy that you can count on moving into 2026, and that's where you hope that the Shamar Stewart story picks up that same trajectory, that make a little bit of progress this second year, make a lot more progress your third year. You'd like to see it come faster. You hope it comes faster. The jury's still very much out, but the best I can give you is I just think it's incomplete just because of the injury situation.
I'd say I have a lot of points to give on this whole situation. I'd say one of them being the fact that typically how our rookies start out is that they start out very quiet, and then in their second or third year, they take a huge leap that like nobody ever expected, and then you can't wait to see them just grow as a player, honestly. But as a team that really wants to win now, we can't be picking players that we just bet on their athleticism. We bet on like what we've seen on tape and stuff, even though like he had barely any stats in college. Like he had quite a few tackles, but he didn't have the sacks that like people are looking for in edge rushers, which I'd say obviously you can't really judge a book by its cover essentially. But at the exact same time, when your rookie season contains only 11 total tackles, one sack, and one pass deflection. That's not really much, even under 8 games, especially as a first round rookie edge rusher like Shamar Stewart that we were trying to bet on. I told this to somebody else on my podcast before. During draft night, I had, when I was using my old laptop, I was in a call with a friend that I had actually done an episode with the previous episode before. And we were talking about, I was like, please don't be Shamar Stewart. Please don't be Shamar Stewart. I was praying for either Jade Barron or Malachi Starks, mainly because of the fact that our secondary looks so much worse than it was this season. So I was really betting on them to take somebody in the secondary. And they took Shamar, and I absolutely lost it.
And it's understandable. It's because, again, you did need more productivity from a guy in his first season. I went back, I think mid-season might have been bye week, and did a 3-round mock draft, just kind of guys who were bypassed that were probably easy selections. In the first round, I like Malachi Starks, but in the first round, I took Jihad Campbell, who had a good rookie year with the Eagles as a linebacker. You obviously wanted a linebacker because you drafted two of them. In the second round, Tate Ratliff was still on the board as a guard, had a better rookie year than Dylan Fairchild, although Dylan Fairchild had a nice rookie year, but not to the degree. In the third round, there was Xavier Watts. He needed a safety. He played for Al Golden at Notre Dame. It felt like that was almost a no-brainer. Instead, once you took Stewart in the first round, you clearly wanted linebacker. They went there in the second and the fourth round. You definitely needed a guard that you could plug and play. They had to go there in the third round. And so it changed the whole dynamic of the draft. I hope Shamar Stewart pans out. He is a freak athlete. He does some freaky things that you can just see the athleticism. But that's all well and good, man. The productivity is the thing, and it wasn't a very productive rookie year. But I still have to go back to giving it an incomplete just because of the injuries.
Yeah, I'd be in agreement with you, obviously, because like you said, during training in rookie camp, even though I don't actually know, he wasn't there for rookie camp because he was still trying to find and finalize a rookie contract, which God knows how long that took. I'm pretty sure it was like middle of July before we got something figured out with him.
It took him into training camp.
Yep. Yep, it definitely did. And when we did get to see him in training camp, he definitely showed really, really good signs of like a dominant edge rusher. And like you said,
he was great.
He just needs to finish on either the sack or the tackle as an athlete. You know, you do all this pressuring towards the opposing team's O line, but if you can't get to the quarterback, what's the point? You know,
or finish. Yeah, or finish.
I mean, it's either that. I mean, obviously, his one pass deflection could be noted as like, you know, the really great amount of pressuring that he can give on as an edge rusher. But what good does it if, you know, like you said, you can't finish on contact, you can't finish on the sack or anything else like that. But I'd say, yeah, he's definitely incomplete. But one source actually graded him as the worst first-round pick of the 2025 NFL Draft this season.
Well, he was the worst graded edge rusher from ProFootballFocus.com for those that qualified this year too. And I think, you know, some of those things I take with a grain of salt, those grades, but I think sometimes they back up what your eyeballs showed you, and I think that's what that did right there.
Yeah, I'd say there's from many NFL fans, they try and give rookies a 3-year stint. You know, the first year, obviously, it's necessary to see how they pan out on a team. Obviously, they can come in, they can do rough, they could do good. It just depends on like what the coaches see out of them. If they're performing better in practice, if they're steadily getting better by the year. Second year, you typically see a little bit of growth. Maybe you'll see a jump here or there, depending on what rookie you're watching, what previous rookie you're watching, and then the third year you really see them take flight essentially for the team, and they really find their role on that team that they're on. And I just say that Shamar Stewart is one of those cases. You know, he's got to figure out how to get there on how to get to the quarterback on contact, how to get past the edge rushers, to get a tackle, get a tackle for. He hasn't had a tackle for loss yet, which is surprising.
Other than the sack, other than the sack.
And obviously he's only had 5 solo tackles, with 6 of them being assisted out of the 11 that he's had in total, which obviously can equate to really good teamwork. But I'd like to see him do a little bit more of like solo work on tackling because, he's a freak of an athlete. He could probably handle it himself if he just tries just as much as he did in college. And he just needs to keep his head up, even though people aren't regarding him as like the really great at all or anything like that. And people are sometimes regarding him worse as like rookie Miles Murphy now. It's like, yeah, but Miles Murphy wasn't really played all that much in his rookie season. He was mainly behind Sam Hubbard before he retired. He had to learn behind him, and I'd say that's what really got him to the leap this year. And I'd say once he's behind, and injured and all that sort of stuff, it gives him time to think and it gives him time to grow and develop as a player. And I'd say that second or third year is going to be his leap year.
They need him to do it for sure.
Absolutely. Well, ending this off, I do have one last question for you, and that would be, what advice would you give a person going into the sports media industry, whether it's sports anchoring, sports broadcasting, sports commentating, because you've been around the block with all of those, as far as I'm concerned.
For one, I'd say learn to write. Learn to write grammatically correct. Doesn't have to be. You don't have to be. A wordsmith columnist, but you need to be able to learn to write grammatically correctly with facts, the who, what, when, where, why, how of things. That's very important. Um, Learning to speak. I think following. I watched a lot of people growing up and would try to emulate the way certain people did things, but also be yourself. I mean, there's two parts to that. Of see some of those people who are really polished and how do they do things and why are they polished, and at the same time be yourself. And third, and I think the most important of this thing is always do your homework. Come prepared. Be have your information ready. All those things. I asked you how to pronounce your name at the beginning of this podcast because it could pronounce Rowan or Rowan. There's a Rowan County in northern Kentucky, and there's Rowans of the world, right? And even something as simple as the last name of Smith. 99% of the time, that last name is pronounced Smith. There's a guy that played basketball 40 years ago who pronounced it Smythe. And so I think those little things are always important. If you're broadcasting a game, if you're doing a story, and if you're doing it where you're pronouncing somebody's name, pronounce it correctly. Ask them how to pronounce it. And sometimes, you may ask a coach and he may screw it up. And at least you've tried to do your due diligence by asking those things. But I think those little things are even important. So to me, always be prepared for whatever it is you're doing, whether it's you're writing the story on a subject, whether you're talking about the subject, whether you're announcing a game about players, have knowledge about them. Always do your homework. I think that's extraordinarily important.
I think that that's personally great advice. I try and double check, triple check on all of my work personally. I try and make sure that I have stats ready for any podcast episode, so where I can check back on, I can obviously give insight on, and I can obviously be correct on. Obviously, there was a few things that I might have missed the mark on, but it was things I wasn't planning to obviously discuss as much as the other things I had written down for. So there's definitely expect the unexpected is essentially my thought.
I'll give you one more piece here. It's don't be afraid to do something for free. Early in my career, I was working for a small weekly newspaper. When I got out of college, went to a small daily pretty quickly after that. But I also, through a friend of a friend, started broadcasting stuff for a public cable access outfit. I did a bowling show. I did a police pistol thing. We did some high school football games. I didn't get paid a nickel for it, but boy, was it great experience. I'm not here to tell you do stuff for free your whole life. I mean, you're trying to earn a living in this business,
You got to
so
get money
eventually you'll earn
somehow.
that living. But I was working a full time radio show, full time newspaper job when Channel 12 asked me to do the Sunday night thing, and they weren't going to be able to pay me. But I thought, why not? I mean, I'll go do this and see if it works out, and that led to eventually being hired full time by them. So don't be afraid to do things for free. Don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone. This past year I did some stuff for St. Xavier High School, and one of the things that I ended up doing was rugby. I've never done rugby in my life. I studied up the rules on it. I still am learning it. I picked the brain of the coach because I don't know all the ins and outs of how rugby is played, but it was totally outside my comfort zone. But I thought, yeah, you know what? Who knows? I'll give this a whirl. So don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone either.
I'd say definitely one sport I want to get into with commentating because obviously I want to become a color analyst. I see play by play. I looked at it. I did it once, and I just wasn't really that much into it because of how fast paced any sport can be with play by play and
Sure.
how much you have to be correct on. You can't really screw up or anything like that, or else it's. And obviously, I was doing high school commentating, but I just say I had more of a flow when doing like pregame, halftime shows, and then just being a color analyst for any sports game I was commentating for. But I'd say you're absolutely right. Not being afraid to do things for free, not being afraid to try anything new. I really want to try commentating lacrosse because a lot of my friends are playing lacrosse right now for college. One of them being was top five in the recruiting class for last year's lacrosse recruiting class, which was Khalif Hawker, Hooker, Hawker, going to Ohio State. And a lot of my other friends, one of them went to Province, which was Trent Yelton. Another one, I believe, went to Limounier. And yeah, I just say that there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. I'm not afraid to do anything for free, but there's definitely people out there who probably going to watch this and say, yeah, I definitely didn't think about that, but I'll probably put into consideration. But some people obviously have trouble executing it, and I'd say just do something that's outside your comfort zone. Well, I want to thank you, Richard, for coming on and talking with me. Obviously, it's not every day that you get invited onto a podcast typically because you're the one typically the main one doing the podcasting. But it was amazing to have you on as a guest here on RSL.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 6, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.